Grandma didn't only watch the moon before she planted the garden. In part 1, we learned what she meant when she said the signs weren't right, and how moon phases, zodiac signs, and an old almanac could help decide when seeds went into the ground. But those signs didn't stop at the garden gate. Some families watched them before cutting hair, harvesting crops, working with livestock, even for certain jobs around the home. And some of Grandma's moon lore? Well, there may have been a little more behind it than superstition. Come sit with me, my creepy cuties. I'm Vivian Vale, and we're opening the book of granny magic again. Because tonight, we're finding out just how far Grandma was willing to let the moon run her calendar. Across different rural traditions, people consulted lunar phases, zodiac signs, or sometimes both together, to decide when certain work ought to be done. Plant, transplant, prune, harvest, cut wood, work with livestock, and in some families, the signs reached right into household and family life. But remember, there was never one universal rule book. Different regions had different traditions. Different almanacs gave different advice. And one grandmother's absolute rule could be another grandmother's complete nonsense. So just how specific could these rules get? Very specific. Remember our mountain gardener from part 1? In testimony preserved by Foxfire, Harriet Coles remembered potatoes and onions being associated with the dark nights. Cabbage was planted when the sign was in the head, beans when it was in the arms. Plants could be set out when the sign was in the thighs. And she remembered being told not to plant when the sign was in the bowels because the seed would rot. Those aren't rules I invented for granny magic. They're examples of rules someone remembered being taught by her parents. And then, there was your hair. Oh yes, folklore had opinions about that too. A widely repeated tradition says cutting hair while the moon is waxing encourages faster or stronger growth. If you wanted slower regrowth, some traditions favored the waning moon. Versions of lunar timing have also been attached to other personal and household activities, and those beliefs still circulate today. But remember our granny magic rule: a tradition surviving is not the same thing as a tradition being scientifically proven. There isn't good evidence that your hair grows faster simply because you scheduled the haircut according to a particular lunar phase. In some regional traditions, people even consulted the signs for things such as weaning children or animals and performing particular livestock jobs. Other calendars assigned favorable times for cutting wood, pruning plants, harvesting crops, or beginning particular work. Think about what that means. The sky wasn't merely something beautiful above the farm. For some families, it was part of the calendar of the farm, and sometimes of the household too. Then came the harvest. You'll encounter family and regional beliefs about choosing favorable signs or moon phases for certain kinds of preserving and seasonal food work. But I want to be very careful here. These practices varied tremendously. There was no universal Appalachian rule saying every jar had to be canned under one particular moon. And if you preserve food today, please use modern, tested food safety instructions. Granny Magic tells us what people believed and did. It does not replace proper food safety guidance. We preserve the story. Not the botulism. You're welcome. But Grandma didn't need an almanac to read every sign sometimes. She just looked up. Have you ever seen a great pale ring surrounding the moon and heard somebody say weather's coming? Well, this is one of those wonderful moments when old observation and modern science actually shake hands. A lunar halo can form when moonlight passes through ice crystals suspended in high, thin clouds, and those high clouds can occur ahead of an approaching weather system. So the halo isn't causing the storm, and a ring doesn't guarantee rain, but generations of people watching the sky could notice that one sometimes followed the other. Then there was the crescent. You may have heard somebody call it a wet moon or a dry moon. Sometimes people looked at a crescent lying almost on its back like a little bowl. Could it hold water? Or did it look as though the water would pour out? And from that came weather predictions. Here's the funny part. Different traditions couldn't even agree which one meant rain. Some said a moon that could hold water meant one thing, while other people interpreted the exact same moon in precisely the opposite way. Historical collections of weather lore record those contradictions, and astronomy gives us a much less mysterious explanation. The apparent tilt of the crescent changes because of geometry, involving the positions and orientations of the Earth, Moon, and Sun, along with the season and where you're observing from. It isn't the moon tipping over, because somebody needs an umbrella. Although I admit, Grandma's version is more fun. And that's where I think these stories become really interesting. A woman who spent decades working outside noticed things. Clouds, wind, frost, birds, insects, flowers, soil, rain, the smell of the air before a storm. She might not have known the scientific mechanism behind everything she observed. Sometimes she identified a real pattern. Sometimes she connected two things that weren't actually connected. And sometimes a coincidence became a family rule, which finally brings us back to the question I promised we'd answer. Does planting by the moon actually make your garden grow better? The scientific evidence does not currently support traditional lunar planting calendars as a reliable way of improving crop growth or yield. But there is an interesting wrinkle. Scientists continue investigating how organisms respond to natural environmental cycles, and research has explored whether extremely faint moonlight can produce measurable responses in plants. Now listen carefully, because this distinction matters. Evidence that plants can respond to moonlight does not prove Grandma's planting calendar. And it certainly doesn't prove that beans grow better, because the moon happens to be in Gemini. Those are separate claims requiring separate evidence. And yes, I can already hear somebody, but Vivian, the moon moves the whole ocean. It certainly contributes to Earth's tides, but that doesn't mean its gravitational influence works on a tomato plant in the same way. The fact that lunar gravity contributes to ocean tides does not establish the traditional claims made about planting according to moon phases or zodiac signs. A true fact about the moon doesn't automatically make every claim made about the moon true. And folklore doesn't need us to pretend otherwise. Here's something else I find fascinating. These ideas didn't disappear when Grandma did. People still buy lunar gardening calendars. Almanacs still discuss moon lore. Gardeners still debate waxing and waning phases. And biodynamic agriculture has incorporated lunar and other celestial calendars as well, although those specific lunar planting claims remain scientifically disputed. So this isn't merely something people used to believe, the conversation is still happening. And maybe that's because farming has always been an argument with uncertainty. Too much rain, not enough, late frost, early frost, insects, disease, a short growing season. A family depended upon things nobody could completely control. But every night there was the moon, waxing, full, waning, dark, beginning again. Whatever else you believed about it, it gave time a rhythm. And maybe that's the part of Grandma's tradition I wouldn't mind borrowing. Not the idea that Pisces is secretly bossing around my potatoes, but the habit of looking before doing. Grandma watched. She waited. She noticed. She understood that the garden didn't care how busy her schedule was. There was a season to plant, a season to gather, a season to leave something alone, and then a season to begin again. So tonight, go outside and look at the moon. Imagine somebody standing beneath that same light 100 years ago, dirt beneath her fingernails, an almanac waiting beside the lamp, seeds tucked into her apron. Maybe she didn't understand every force moving through the world around her. Neither do we, but she watched closely enough to know that nature had rhythms, and she taught her children to watch too. Then one day, those children heard themselves saying the same thing. No, not today. The signs aren't right now. I need your family's version. Did your grandmother plant by the signs? Cut hair by the moon? Watch a ring around the moon for rain? Did she use the signs for livestock, preserving, weaning, or something I haven't mentioned? Tell me exactly what she did, and tell me where she was from, because I suspect there are hundreds of versions of this story, still hiding in our families, and I'd very much like to gather them. Until next time, my creepy cuties, look up once in a while and keep a little granny magic with you.